Hi, and welcome to my channel. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Chapter 1. In the Beginning. Long ago, before people arrived, America was a vast and beautiful land. There were mountains, forests, lakes, and rivers filled with animals and fish, but no humans lived there. Around 1600 years ago, the first people came to North America. They traveled from Asia to Alaska, crossing a land bridge that once connected the two continents. These early people moved south, spreading across the land. Over time, they became the Native Americans, as well as the Maya, Aztecs, and Inca in Central and South America. In the far north, in the Arctic region, another group known as the Inuit, Eskimos, settled in. For thousands of years, these people lived in different ways. Some built great cities while others lived in small villages and hunted animals for food. They developed unique cultures, languages, and traditions. However, their way of life began to change when Europeans arrived in the 16th century. Explorers and settlers came from countries like Spain, France, Britain, and the Netherlands, searching for new land, wealth, and trade opportunities. Soon, more and more people from Europe and Africa arrived. The land that was once empty became filled with different cultures, languages, and ideas. Over the centuries, millions of immigrants continued to come to America. They came from all over the world, hoping for freedom, opportunity, and a better life. This movement continued until the middle of the 20th century, shaping the country into what it is today. Despite this growth, only a small number of Native Americans remain in the land that was once theirs. Many lost their land and way of life due to war, disease, and European expansion. Today, North America consists of just 3 countries: Canada, Mexico, and the United States. However, history could have been different, as many other colonies and settlements existed in the past. The United States grew rapidly and now has a population of over 300 million people living in 50 states. But the people of the United States are not all the same. About 67% are white, 13% are Hispanic, Spanish-speaking, 13% are Black, 4% are Asian, and just 1% are Native American. The English language is the most common, but many people speak Spanish, and American English is different from British English. With so many different people and cultures, the United States is a unique and diverse country. But how was it created? How did it grow into one of the most powerful nations in the world? What kind of country is it today? To answer these questions, we must look at the history of America, from its early settlers to the struggles and victories that shaped it. This book will tell the story of how the United States was born and how it became the country we know today. Chapter 2. The Pilgrim Fathers. The name America comes from an Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci, who sailed to South America between 1499 and 1502. However, he was not the first European to cross the Atlantic. The Vikings from Scandinavia traveled to North America around the year 1000, reaching a place they called Vinland, which is believed to be in present-day Canada or New England. However, they did not stay for long. Later, in 1492, an Italian sailor named Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean while searching for a sea route to India. He mistakenly believed he had arrived in India and called the local people Indians. After Columbus returned to Europe and shared his discoveries, more explorers followed. Sailors such as John Cabot and Jacques Cartier crossed the Atlantic, and European fishermen began traveling to the rich waters of North America. However, it was not until the 17th century that Europeans began to settle in North America. The French established a colony in Quebec, Canada, the Dutch settled in New York, and the British founded colonies in Virginia and New England. Two very different groups of English settlers crossed the Atlantic. The first group founded the colony of Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. They hoped to find gold, but life in the new land was harsh. Many settlers died from hunger and disease, and the colony struggled to survive. The situation improved when they started growing tobacco, a crop that became highly valuable in Europe. To help with farming, they began bringing enslaved Africans to work on the plantations. One of the key figures in Jamestown was Captain John Smith, who became friends with a Native American woman named Pocahontas, the daughter of a chief. She later married an Englishman named John Rolfe and traveled to England. In 1620, another group of English settlers, known as the Pilgrims, arrived in Plymouth, Massachusetts, on a ship called the Mayflower. Unlike the Jamestown settlers, the Pilgrims were not looking for gold. They were seeking religious freedom because they did not agree with the Church of England. They wanted to create a new society where they could practice their religion freely. The Pilgrims worked hard to farm the land and trade animal skins. They believed that all people were equal, so they did not keep slaves. However, life was very difficult in the new land, and nearly half of them died in the first year. The Pilgrims received help from a Native American named Squanto, who had been captured and taken to England years before. Because of this, he learned to speak English and was able to help the Pilgrims. He taught them how to hunt, fish, and grow corn, which helped them survive. In the autumn of 1621, the Pilgrims held a great feast to give thanks for their first successful harvest. This celebration became known as Thanksgiving, and it is still celebrated every year in the United States on the fourth Thursday of November. Families gather together and eat a large meal, often including turkey and pumpkin pie, just as the Pilgrims did centuries ago. Chapter 3: The War of Independence. In the 17th century, more and more British people moved to North America and established colonies along the East Coast. By 1770, there were 13 British colonies, including Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, North and South Carolina, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Georgia, New York, and Delaware. These colonies were controlled by Britain, but many colonists became frustrated with British rule. The British government imposed high taxes on the colonies without giving them representation in Parliament. This led to growing anger among the colonists, who believed it was unfair to be taxed without having a voice in their government. One of the most famous acts of protest was the Boston Tea Party in December 1773. A group of colonists threw 342 boxes of British tea into the sea at Boston Harbor to protest against the tax on tea. The British government responded with harsh measures, and tensions between the colonies and Britain escalated. In April 1775, the first battle between British soldiers and American colonists took place in Lexington and Concord, near Boston. As the fighting spread, more and more colonists joined the cause, forcing the British soldiers to retreat to Boston. The conflict had now turned into a war. A wealthy farmer from Virginia named George Washington was chosen as the leader of the American Army. Washington was known for his honesty and leadership skills, and he quickly became a key figure in the fight for independence. One famous story about him says that as a boy he cut down a cherry tree, and when asked about it by his father, admitted the truth, saying, "I cannot tell a lie." This story, whether true or not, helped build Washington's reputation as a man of strong morals. At first, the American colonies did not demand full independence from Britain, but in the summer of 1776, that changed. A man named Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, a document that explained why the colonies wanted to separate from Britain. The Declaration, adopted on July 4, 1776, stated that all people had the right to life, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. The 4th of July is still celebrated as Independence Day, one of the most important holidays in the United States. The war lasted for several years, with both sides experiencing victories and defeats. The British Army was well trained and powerful, but the American soldiers were determined to fight for their freedom. In October 1781, the American forces, with the help of France, won a decisive battle at Yorktown, Virginia, forcing the British to surrender. 2 years later, in 1783, Britain officially recognized the United States as an independent nation. After the war, the new country needed a leader, and in 1789, George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. Although he wanted to return to his farm at Mount Vernon, he agreed to serve the country and helped establish the new government. Washington remained president until 1797 and is remembered as one of the most important figures in American history. The United States of America was born out of the desire for freedom, and its people worked hard to build a strong and independent nation. Chapter 4: The Civil War. By the middle of the 19th century, the United States was growing rapidly, with a population of 31 million people. However, there were serious differences between the northern and southern states, which led to a terrible war. The main conflict was over slavery. In the South, many people depended on enslaved workers to grow cotton, which was their most important crop. The North, however, did not allow slavery, and many people believed it was wrong. As the country expanded westward, Southerners wanted to bring slavery to new territories, but Northerners opposed this idea. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected as the 16th President of the United States. He was a member of the Republican Party, which strongly opposed the expansion of slavery. Many people in the South were unhappy with Lincoln's election, and on December 24, 1860, South Carolina announced that it wanted to leave the United States. Soon, other Southern states followed, and together they formed the Confederate States of America. This decision led to the start of the Civil War in April 1861, when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The South had many advantages at the beginning of the war. They had experienced military leaders, such as General Robert E. Lee, and they made a lot of money by selling cotton to Britain. However, the North had a larger population, more factories, and better resources. Most importantly, they had Abraham Lincoln, who became one of the greatest presidents in American history. He was born in Kentucky, worked hard to educate himself, and believed strongly in the rights and freedom of all people. His leadership helped keep the North united during the war. One of the most important battles of the war was fought in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in 1863. The Northern Army won this battle, which became a turning point in the war. After the battle, Lincoln gave a famous speech known as the Gettysburg Address, where he spoke about the importance of democracy and freedom. Meanwhile, two Northern generals played key roles in leading the Union to victory. General William Sherman led his soldiers on a march from Atlanta, Georgia, to the Atlantic coast, destroying Southern railways and supplies. General Ulysses S. Grant led the Union Army and finally defeated the Confederate forces. In April 1865, General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Appomattox, marking the end of the Civil War. Sadly, just 5 days after the war ended, President Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater. Lincoln's death was a great loss for the country, and his successors struggled to reunite the North and the South. Even though slavery had been abolished, the rights of Black Americans remained a major issue. Many Southerners resisted change, and conflicts over racial equality continued for years. The Civil War had claimed at least 600,000 lives, making it one of the deadliest conflicts in American history. Despite the war's end, the struggle for civil rights and equality in the United States was far from over. Chapter 5: The Wild West. During the 19th century, many people moved to the western part of the United States, a time known as the era of the Wild West. Today, movies and television shows often portray this period as full of cowboys, Native Americans, and gunfights. However, the reality was quite different. There were no more than 400 cowboys, and most of them worked hard herding cattle rather than fighting. Many cowboys were Black or Mexican, and their main job was to take cattle from Texas to railway towns in Kansas and Missouri. From there, the cattle were sent to Chicago, where they were processed into meat and sold in the eastern cities. The cowboy era lasted only about 30 years before the government gave land to farmers, making large cattle drives unnecessary. Between 1862 and 1900, more than 500,000 farmers settled in the West, starting new farms and growing food. Life was not easy for these settlers, especially during the harsh winters. They lived in isolated areas, far from towns, and had to rely on their own skills to survive. Some of these experiences were later described by Laura Ingalls Wilder in her famous books, such as Little House on the Prairie. Fortunately, railways helped connect these remote areas. In 1869, a major railway was completed, linking the eastern and western parts of the country. This made travel across the United States much easier and faster. Before railways, sending mail across the country was a challenge. One famous solution was the Pony Express, which operated between 1860 and 1861. Riders on horseback carried letters across the country, each riding about 120 kilometers before handing the mail to the next rider. Despite its speed, the Pony Express lasted only a short time before the telegraph system made it unnecessary. One of the most well-known figures of the Wild West was Buffalo Bill Cody. He started as a soldier and buffalo hunter, reportedly killing 4,280 buffalo in 1 year. In the 1880s, he created Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show, a traveling performance that included reenactments of cowboy life, shooting competitions, and even real Native Americans, such as the famous Lakota chief Sitting Bull. Another famous performer in these shows was Annie Oakley, a woman known for her incredible shooting skills. Although the Wild West is often romanticized, life for settlers, farmers, and cowboys was challenging. Many small towns were built during this time, but law and order were often weak. Some towns became famous for their outlaws and gunfights. However, as more people moved west, new laws were enforced and cities began to grow. By the early 20th century, the era of the Wild West had ended, but its legends and stories continued to shape American culture. The spirit of adventure, hard work, and survival during this time remains an important part of American history. Chapter 6: Native Americans. Before Europeans arrived in North America, about 2 million Native Americans lived there. They were divided into 300 different tribes and spoke more than 2,000 languages. These tribes had their own ways of life, traditions, and beliefs. However, when Europeans came, things changed quickly. Many Native Americans were killed in battles, and others died from diseases brought by the newcomers. The famous novel, The Last of the Mohicans, tells the story of how one Native American tribe disappeared in the 18th century. In the western part of the USA, Native American tribes such as the Cheyenne, Blackfoot, and Sioux lived on the plains. They depended on buffalo for food, clothing, and shelter. There were about 60 million buffalo in North America at one time, but when settlers arrived, they began hunting them in large numbers. The settlers wanted land for farming and railways, so they killed the buffalo and took the land from the Native Americans. By 1,900, fewer than 1,000 buffalo remained, and the Native American population had dropped to under 2,5,0,0,0. One of the most famous Native American leaders was Sitting Bull, a Sioux chief. He fought against the U.S. government to protect his people's land. In 1876, he led his warriors to victory at the Battle of Little Bighorn, defeating General Custer and his soldiers. However, the Native Americans could not win the war. In 1890, the U.S. Army killed many Sioux men, women, and children at the Battle of Wounded Knee. This was the last major battle between Native Americans and the U.S. government. After this, most Native Americans were forced to live on reservations, special lands set aside for them by the government. Even today, about 1/3 of Native Americans live on reservations. Many of these areas are poor and there are not enough jobs. Some Native Americans have started businesses, such as casinos, to bring money to their communities. Others have chosen to keep alcohol out of their reservations to protect their people. Some of the largest reservations are in the Southwest, where tribes like the Hopi and Zuni live. These groups have strong cultural traditions and create beautiful pottery, silver jewelry, and woven blankets. The Navajo people have the largest reservation, covering nearly 6,500 square kilometers. They are known for their colorful blankets and rich cultural traditions. The Navajo language is unique, and during World War II, the U.S. military used Navajo speakers to send secret messages. The enemy could not understand these messages, making the Navajo code talkers an important part of the war effort. Today, Native Americans continue to preserve their culture while also adapting to modern life. They face many challenges, but they also take pride in their history and traditions. Many Native Americans work hard to protect their land, language, and way of life, ensuring that their culture will survive for future generations. Chapter 7: New Americans. At the beginning of the 19th century, most American families came from Britain, Germany, and Scandinavia. They were mainly farmers or business people. However, things started to change when factories were built and cities grew. Many poor people from different countries came to America, hoping to find jobs and a better life. Between 1840 and 1900, about 5 million people arrived from Ireland. Another 5 million came from Italy and millions more from Russia, Poland, and other Eastern European countries. These immigrants dreamed of freedom and opportunity, but life in America was not always easy for them. America kept its doors open to immigrants until 1924, and between 1880 and 1930, around 27 million people arrived. Many of them were poor, had different religions, and had little education. They often faced discrimination because they were different. Immigrants from Europe entered the country through Ellis Island in New York. There, officials checked them for diseases and other problems before allowing them to stay. Near Ellis Island stands the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of hope and freedom. The statue has a famous inscription, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." These words welcomed the many immigrants who arrived in the USA, hoping for a better future. Chinese immigrants also came to America, mainly settling in the West. During the California Gold Rush in 1848, about 300,000 Chinese immigrants arrived, hoping to find work. Many of them stayed and helped build railways across the country. However, like Black Americans and Native Americans, they faced discrimination and were not given the same rights as white people. In 1882, the U.S. government passed a law that stopped more Chinese people from entering the country. Despite this, Chinese immigrants continued to contribute to American society. In the 20th century, Chinese communities grew, and today cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles have large Chinese populations. Most immigrants who came from Europe settled in big cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago. They found work in factories, but the jobs were often difficult and dangerous. Even though they learned English and became American citizens, many immigrants wanted to keep their own traditions. This is why many cities in the USA have areas like Little Italy or Chinatown, where people can find Italian or Chinese food, shops, and culture. Irish Americans celebrate St. Patrick's Day every March 17, and Chinese Americans celebrate Chinese New Year, with San Francisco hosting one of the largest celebrations. Today, most new immigrants to the USA come from Spanish-speaking countries like Mexico and Puerto Rico. Since 1980, more than 6 million people from these countries have arrived, making Spanish the second most spoken language in the USA. Many Hispanic immigrants work hard to support their families and build new lives in America. America has always been a nation of immigrants. Each group has brought its own culture, traditions, and ideas. Even though many immigrants have faced difficulties, they have also helped shape the USA into the diverse and vibrant country it is today. Chapter 8: Black Americans. Today, about 39 million of the 300 million people in the USA are Black. In the past, most Black Americans lived in the South and worked in the cotton and tobacco fields. Many of them were slaves, forced to work for white landowners without freedom or rights. In the mid-19th century, a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe helped people see how terrible slavery was. It told the story of a slave family trying to escape, and it made many people believe that keeping slaves was wrong. During this time, many slaves used the Underground Railroad to escape from the South to the North, where slavery was illegal. The Underground Railroad was not a real railroad, but a secret network of safe houses that helped slaves travel to freedom. Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass were famous former slaves who helped others escape. Douglass learned to read and write, which gave him the power to fight for freedom. He later traveled to Europe to speak against slavery and then returned to the USA to start newspapers and encourage Black men to join the army during the Civil War. Harriet Tubman, who escaped in 1849, made many dangerous trips back to the South to help other slaves escape. She once said, "I can only die once," showing her bravery. After the Civil War, slavery was finally abolished, but life did not get much easier for Black Americans. Many white Southerners were angry that slaves were now free, and they treated Black people unfairly. Some white men joined a group called the Ku Klux Klan. which used violence and fear to control Black communities. Even though Black men got the right to vote in 1870, many did not use this right because they were afraid. The book To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, set in the 1930s, tells the story of a Black man falsely accused of a crime, showing the injustice Black people faced. In the 20th century, many Black Americans moved to northern cities to find jobs. Even in the North, they were often treated unfairly and had to live separately from white people. In the South, they were forced to sit in different areas on buses and eat in different parts of restaurants. Until 1954, Black children had to go to separate schools. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement began. Martin Luther King Jr. was a leader in this movement, using peaceful protests to fight for equal rights. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama. This started a bus boycott that lasted over a year, hurting the bus companies financially. Black people also sat in whites-only restaurants as a form of peaceful protest. In 1963, 200,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C., where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Finally, in 1964, a law was passed to give Black Americans equal rights. Even with new laws, racism did not disappear. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and riots broke out in many cities. Over time, Black Americans gained more opportunities in business and government. Leaders like Condoleezza Rice, who worked in the U.S. government, showed that times were changing. However, problems remained. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, most of the people who lost their homes were Black. Some believed the government was slow to help because of racism. While Black Americans have made great progress, challenges still exist. The fight for true equality continues, but their history is a story of strength, courage, and perseverance. Chapter 9: The Government of the USA. The government of the United States has three main parts: Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. These three parts have different jobs, but they are all equally important. Every American citizen has the right to vote when they turn 18 years old. Women got the right to vote in 1920, and now all Americans can vote in elections to choose their leaders. Congress is responsible for making the laws. It has two parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state, and they serve for 6 years. The House of Representatives has 435 members, and they serve for 2 years. Larger states like California have more representatives, while small states like Wyoming or Delaware only have 1. The President is the most powerful person in the government. The President leads the country and is also the head of the army. Americans vote for a new president every 4 years, and no one can be president for more than 8 years. The president can say no to laws made by Congress, but Congress can also say no to the president's decisions. The president lives and works in the White House in Washington, D.C. He also chooses judges for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the country. It has 9 judges who decide if laws are fair. They can also say if the president or Congress has done something wrong. As well as the national government, each state has its own government, which makes rules about many things, such as the legal age for marriage or driving a car. States also have different punishments for crimes. For example, some states use the death penalty for murder, while others only give prison sentences. Puerto Rico is a special part of the USA, but it is not a state. People from Puerto Rico do not pay American taxes and cannot vote in American elections. However, they are still American citizens. There are two major political parties in the USA, the Republicans and the Democrats. Republicans believe that people should work hard and take care of themselves, so they think taxes should be low. Democrats believe the government should help the poor, so they think taxes are necessary. However, the difference between the two parties is not always clear. After the 2000 election, a map showed that most Democrat states were in the Northeast, the West, and around the Great Lakes, while Republican states were across the center and in the South. Many Americans are proud that they do not have a king or queen. They believe that anyone can become president. However, becoming president requires a lot of money for advertising, so it is easier for rich people to win elections. Some families have had more than one president. For example, John Adams and his son John Quincy Adams were both presidents. George H.W. Bush was president from 1989 to 1993, and his son George W. Bush became president in 2001. Jeb Bush, another son, was the governor of Florida. Some families have come close to having two presidents. John F. Kennedy's brother Robert Kennedy wanted to be president, but he was killed in 1968. Many people also believe that Hillary Clinton could become president after her husband Bill Clinton. If she does, she will be the first female president in American history. To be a successful president, a person must speak well to large crowds. Ronald Reagan, the 40th president, was a great speaker because he was an actor before he became a politician. He was the governor of California before becoming president from 1981 to 1989. Another actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, also became a politician. He was elected governor of California in 2003. Many people believe that more film stars will enter politics in the future. The American government is unique because of its balance of power. Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court each have different responsibilities, making sure no one has too much control. The system allows citizens to vote for their leaders and participate in their democracy. While it may not be perfect, the government of the USA continues to shape the country's future. Chapter 10: Living in the USA. Many people around the world recognize the USA from movies and TV shows. America is a big country with many different lifestyles. Some people live in big cities, while others live in small towns or on farms. Most Americans who have jobs live comfortably. They work about 40 hours a week and have 2 weeks of vacation each year. Some holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas are very important. Many people travel long distances to be with their families on these special days. Most American families have two working parents. Farming is still important, but fewer people work as farmers today. Instead, many Americans work in offices, hospitals, banks, hotels, and stores. However, life can be difficult for people without jobs. The government gives some money to help, but it is not enough to live well. About 13% of Americans are poor. The number is higher for some groups, like Black and Hispanic people. The money in the USA is called a dollar. $1 has 100 cents. Some coins have special names. A 5-cent coin is called a nickel, a 10-cent coin is a dime, and a 25-cent coin is a quarter. In restaurants and taxis, people give extra money called a tip. Many workers depend on tips because their salaries are low. The USA uses different measurements from most other countries. Americans use pounds instead of kilograms, miles instead of kilometers, and Fahrenheit instead of Celsius for temperature. They also write dates differently. For example, the 4th of July is written as 7/4 instead of 4/7. This became well known on September 11, 2001, when the world learned about the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers. People now call that day 9/11. Because the USA is so big, there are different time zones. When it is 12 p.m. in New York, it is 11 a.m. in Kansas, 10 a.m. in Arizona, and 9 a.m. in California. In Alaska, it is 8 a.m., and in Hawaii, it is 7 a.m. Many people think of small towns when they imagine American life. Artist Norman Rockwell painted pictures of small-town life from the 1920s to the 1970s. His paintings show happy families, friendly neighbors, and traditional values. But life in small towns is changing. Today, most Americans live in cities or suburbs. About 2/3 of Americans own their homes. Many houses have gardens, and most families have cars. In fact, about 85% of Americans have a car, and most people drive to work. Drive-in restaurants, coffee shops, and even banks are common. Henry Ford, who started the Ford Car Company, made the first affordable car in 1908. His Model T car changed American life, making travel easier for everyone. Today, many Americans drive big cars called SUVs. Religion is also important in the USA. More than 80% of Americans are Christian. Some states do not allow certain books in schools if they go against Christian beliefs. The USA has many different churches, including churches for Black Americans. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson used churches to fight for civil rights. A large religious group called the Mormons lives mostly in Utah. They follow strict rules, such as not drinking alcohol or smoking. Television is a big part of American life. Most families have a TV, and the average American watches over 7 hours a day. There are more than 1,000 TV stations, and most of them are owned by private businesses, not the government. American TV shows and movies are popular around the world. Newspapers and magazines are also important. There are over 1,500 daily newspapers, but most are only for one city. The most popular newspaper is USA Today, which sells 5 million copies a day. Some famous national newspapers include the New York Times and the Washington Post. Magazines like Time and Newsweek are also well known. Americans love to shop. The first supermarket started in the USA, and today many stores are open 24 hours a day. Some of the world's biggest shopping malls are in America. The Mall of America in Minnesota has over 500 stores and is so big that 32 airplanes could fit inside. In the USA, people pay for health care. Going to the doctor or hospital can be expensive. However, public schools are free. Most children go to school for 12 years. Elementary school is for grades 1 to 5. Middle school is for grades 6 to 8, and high school is for grades 9 to 12. About 85% of students finish high school, and they celebrate with a special party called prom. They also make a yearbook which includes photos and information about all the students. Movies like American Graffiti and The Breakfast Club show what high school life is like. After high school, many students go to college. Some of the most famous universities in the USA are Harvard, Yale, and Berkeley. These schools are known around the world for their high-quality education. Sports are very popular in America. Baseball, basketball, and American football are the three biggest sports. American football is different from soccer because players carry the ball with their hands. Baseball is also very important in American culture. A famous baseball movie called Field of Dreams tells the story of a farmer who builds a baseball field on his farm. Some famous baseball teams are the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. One of the greatest baseball players in history was Babe Ruth. He played for the Yankees and became a legend. American life is a mix of old traditions and modern changes. People work hard, enjoy entertainment, and celebrate their culture in many ways. Whether they live in big cities or small towns, Americans take pride in their country and its way of life. Chapter 11. Eating and Drinking the American Way. American food is famous around the world. Many people know about hamburgers, hot dogs, and French fries. These foods are called fast food. Fast food is easy to find in many countries. Some people love fast food because it is quick and tasty, but fast food is not very healthy. Many Americans eat too much fast food, and some of them become overweight. In the past, American families ate dinner together at the table. Today, many families do not eat together. People eat at different times during the day. Some people eat small meals many times a day instead of 3 big meals. Sweet foods like pies, cakes, and ice cream are also very popular in America. Many American desserts have a lot of sugar. However, some people try to eat healthier foods. They eat more vegetables and fruits. Some people stop eating meat and become vegetarians. An American breakfast is different from a breakfast in other countries. Many Americans eat eggs in the morning. There are many ways to cook eggs. Sunny side up means the egg yolk is on top. Over easy means the egg is cooked on both sides, but the yolk is still soft. People also eat toast, pancakes, and bacon for breakfast. Coffee is very popular in the United States. Many Americans drink coffee every morning. Some people drink coffee all day. Starbucks is a famous coffee shop that started in America. Now you can find Starbucks in many countries. Coca-Cola is another famous American drink. It was made in 1886 by a man named John Pemberton. Today, people drink Coca-Cola in almost every country. The word Coke is one of the most well-known words in the world. America also has good wine. California is famous for its wine. Many people enjoy drinking wine with dinner. But in the United States, people cannot buy alcohol until they are 21 years old. Many states in America have strict rules about smoking. In some places, people cannot smoke inside restaurants or offices. A long time ago, drinking alcohol was against the law. From 1920 to 1933, there was a time called Prohibition. During this time, people could not buy or sell alcohol. But many people still wanted to drink. Criminals like Al Capone brought alcohol into the country and made a lot of money. In the United States, you can find many types of food. Because America has many immigrants, there are many different kinds of restaurants. You can eat Chinese, Mexican, Italian, or Japanese food in almost every city. Over time, some of these foods changed and became special to the USA. For example, Tex-Mex food is a mix of Texan and Mexican food. Cajun food is spicy food from Louisiana. Soul food is popular in the South. It includes dishes like fried chicken, sweet potatoes, and cornbread. American food is a mix of different cultures. People in the USA enjoy many kinds of food. Some people love fast food and some people prefer healthy food. No matter what they eat, food is an important part of American life.